Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting from the Carpinteria Valley Water District to order. Also, for the time being, audio is being recorded, video is not, and we're working on that. Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Lisa, roll call, please.
Director O'Connor?
Here.
Director Balch?
Here.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
And Director Roberts and Director Holcomb are absent, so 3 present.
Okay, item number 3, the agenda confirmation. Kelly, are we on schedule?
No changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Then we got item number 4, public forum. Any person may address the board of directors on any matter within its jurisdiction which is not on the agenda. Anyone? Lisa? Okay. Number 5, consent agenda. 5A, the minute of the meeting of the board held on April 8, 2026. Any questions? Then item number 5B, disbursement report for March 11, 2026 to April 10, 2026. Any questions? Then item number 5C, director's quarterly compensation report, third quarter. Any questions? Then can we have a
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We got a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2 with Director Roberts and Holcomb absent.
Then we got item number 6, unfinished business, none. And then we hereby adjourn to the regular board meeting of the Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Call the meeting to order. Item number 2, Kelly, on the agenda, is it going to be confirmed?
No changes.
No changes. Then we got number 3, public forum. Any person may address the board of directors on any matter within its jurisdiction which is not on the agenda. Lisa? Item number 4, consent agenda. Item 4A, the minutes of the meeting of the board held on April 8, 2026. Any questions? Item number 4B, disbursement report for February 11, 2026 through April 10, 2026. Any questions? And then item number 4C, director's quarterly compensation report, third quarter. Any questions? Then can we have a
Motion to approve the GSA consent agenda.
Second.
We got a motion, a second. Any more questions? Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
And Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2 with Director Roberts and Holcomb absent.
Then we got item number 5, unfinished business, none. Item number 6, new business. 6A, presentation of the Carpinteria Groundwater Basin Sustainability Plan, Water Year 2025, Annual Report. Kelly?
Yes, thank you, directors. So the Sustainability Agency prepared a groundwater sustainability plan, which was adopted in 2024 and subsequently approved by the State Department of Water Resources. And as part of SGMA, we are required to prepare annual reports regarding progress of implementation of the plan. So Robert Marks is here from Pueblo Water Resources. He assisted in preparing the plan and has been our consultant on groundwater-related activities. So go ahead, Robert, when you're
Yeah, hi.
ready.
So again, I'm Robert Marks. I'm a hydrogeologist with Pueblo Water Resources. I've been working as a hydrogeologist in the basin for a little over 30 years now. I was part of the consultant team that put together the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or the GSP. So it's a great privilege for me to be here tonight to provide a summary for the Water Year 2025 GSP Annual Report. Next slide, please. So here's an outline of my presentation. First, I'll just give a little bit of background on the GSP and the basin setting. And then we'll get into the basin conditions during Water Year 2025, and then talk about the progress that was achieved towards basin sustainability based on those conditions. And then we'll have a period of question and answer at the end. Next slide. So GSP background. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, was passed in 2014. The intent was to ensure that groundwater basins in the state of California are brought into sustainable management within 20 years. The Carpinteria groundwater basin was designated as a high priority basin in 2018 by the Department of Water Resources, or DWR. And that designation required the basin to both form a GSA and develop a GSP, or Groundwater Sustainability Plan. The Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency, you folks, was established in 2020, and then work on the GSP was initiated in 2021. So this slide just kind of gives a little schematic of the GSP development schedule. Again, it started in 2021. The first sort of work that was done was a geophysical survey along the beach in front of the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, some monitoring well construction, the development of a public outreach plan. And then as we moved through doing the water budgets, groundwater model updates, development of the sustainable management criteria, or SMCs, a series of public workshops were held as we worked through the GSP to present the information that we were developing and to seek input from the public and basin stakeholders on the GSP as we worked on it. And then the GSP was finally adopted in 2024, January of 2024. Next slide, please. So SGMA requires that GSP annual reports be submitted to DWR by April 1st of each year following adoption of the GSP. The purpose of the annual reports is simply to convey monitoring and water use data both to DWR and basin stakeholders to gauge the performance of the basin relative to the GSP sustainability goals. There have been 2 previous annual reports that have been prepared and submitted. The first one covered water years 21, 22, and 23, so there were 3 years captured in that first report. And basically what they did is they picked up where the GSP analyses left off, which went through water year 2020. And then the second report covered water year 2024. And then this annual report that I'll be talking about covers water year 2025, which is the period of October 2024 through September of 2025. Next slide, please. So as I go through this presentation, I'll be giving or showing various figures and charts that are directly out of the annual report. So as such, some of the fonts and things aren't all that great for presentation purposes, so I will be using my laser pointer as I work through this to kind of guide you through the discussion. So this is a map of the basin boundaries here in black. The basin consists of a structural depression at the base of the Santa Ynez Mountains that has been filled with unconsolidated water-bearing sediments. The northern and eastern boundaries of the basin are defined by the geologic contact between unconsolidated materials and bedrock materials. The western boundary is defined by the boundary with the Montecito Basin over here. And then the southern boundary is defined by the shoreline with the Pacific Ocean. Now it's important to note here that even though the shoreline constitutes the jurisdictional boundary of the groundwater basin for management purposes, basin sediments actually extend well past the shoreline and are believed to be in contact with the Pacific Ocean. And so that has ramifications for the potential for seawater intrusion in the basin, which I'll be discussing at some length here in a little bit. Next slide, please. The basin has been divided into 2 storage units based on the trace of the Rincon Creek Fault here, which is a major structural feature in the basin that represents a barrier to flow based on the amount of offset on the fault. There's about 4,000 feet of offset on the north side of this fault. So on the north side of the fault has been designated as storage unit number 1. It is the deepest part of the basin, and it's where the vast majority of pumping occurs in the basin. South of the Rincon Creek Fault has been designated as storage unit number 2. It's quite a bit shallower. The deepest part, I think, is about 500 feet deep, and there's really very little pumping that occurs in that part of the basin. Next slide, please. So within the basin, there are both confined and unconfined areas. The confined area here is in the central part of the basin, more or less underlies the city limits of the city of Carpinteria. And in this area, there is a relatively shallow clay cap that is laterally continuous in this entire area. And that clay cap limits the vertical percolation of precipitation and stream seepage, and also holds water in the aquifer system under pressure. As you move away from the confined area out towards the margins of the basin, that clay cap becomes discontinuous, which then allows for seepage of precipitation and stream flows, which are the primary sources of recharge in the basin, to get down into the aquifer system of the basin, and therefore it's referred to as the recharge area. Next slide, please. So that was sort of the setting, the physical setting of the basin. Now we'll get into basin conditions. So starting out with precipitation here, this is a table that shows the annual precipitation totals at the Carpinteria Fire Station gauge over the past 5 years. This gauge has data going back all the way to 1949, and the long-term mean precipitation at this gauge is about 17.2 inches. So what you can see here is in 2021 and 2022, there was relatively little rainfall, quite a bit below the long-term mean. Water years 23 and 24, on the other hand, were quite wet, with over 25 inches of rain in both of those years. But 2025, we saw a return to dry conditions, is designated as a critically dry year with only about 8.1 inches of rainfall in the year. Next slide, please. So groundwater pumping over the same period of time. Pumping by both the water district and private ag pumping in the basin. Total pumping in the basin ranges between about 4,300 to 6,900 acre feet per year. And as you can see, the pumping volumes do vary with precipitation. So we see a lot more pumping during dry years, and then in these wet years, there's relatively less pumping. So in 2025, there was a total of about 4,900 acre feet of pumping. About 1,000 acre feet, or 20% of that, was pumped by the district, with the remainder being pumped by private agricultural pumpers. Now, with regards to the level of accuracy on those pumping estimates, district pumping is metered and is therefore considered to have a very high level of accuracy. Agricultural pumping, however, has been historically and up to this point been estimated based on land use surveys. And so the level of accuracy is considered to be sort of medium for that agricultural pumping. As we'll discuss a little bit later, you guys have adopted a well metering ordinance, which will help with that accuracy of private ag pumping quite a bit. Now, it's important to note that in the GSP, one of the things that we were required to do in the GSP was estimate the sustainable yield of the basin, which was a little over 3,700 acre feet a year. So what you can see here is that we've been pumping quite a bit over that amount over the past 5 years or so. And so that that sort of deficient rainfall conditions combined with a little bit higher level of pumping during water year 2025 has a direct effect on water levels and storage in the basin, which I'll talk about next. Next slide, please. So here's one of these graphics that's a little bit hard for you to see, but it's, again, right out of the report. So SGMA requires that water level contour maps be prepared for each water year, one for the seasonal high water level conditions and the other for seasonal low conditions. This is a map showing water level contours for spring of 2025, which was the seasonal high. And the main thing I want to point out here is that even in the spring of 2025, we have a couple of water level depressions here in the central part of the basin, where at that time water levels were about 10 feet below sea level. The other thing that this map shows is the direction of groundwater flow. So the direction of groundwater flow is perpendicular to the lines of equal elevation. And so you can see that the direction of groundwater flow is generally from the recharge area towards the central portion of the area of the basin where we have these pumping depressions. Next slide, please. So this is a contour map for the fall of 2025, representing the basin low condition for the year. And what you can see is that the general pattern of groundwater flow is very similar to what we saw in the spring, but that the magnitude of these water level depressions has expanded and deepened quite significantly. We saw water levels over 50 feet below sea level in the heart of the depressions here in the central part of the basin. Next slide, please. So the other part of the SGMA regulations is that we develop a change in groundwater elevation map. And so this is a map showing the change in groundwater elevations between the fall of 2024 to the fall of 2025. And on this map, the sort of orange, yellow, orangish color areas are areas where we saw declines in water levels. And then the bluish areas are areas where we saw increases in groundwater levels. So what you can see is that the vast majority of the basin during 2025 saw varying degrees of water level declines compared to 2024. Interestingly, however, we did see this area here near the bedrock boundary where the Carpinteria and Gubernador creeks enter the basin, where we actually saw an increase in water levels in that area of the basin. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So based on those changes in groundwater elevations, we calculate what the volume of change in groundwater storage was. And so this table again summarizes the annual changes in groundwater storage since the GSP was adopted. And so again, as you can see, when we have these below normal rainfall conditions, we see depletions of storage. During wet periods, we see accumulations of storage, where the amount of recharge exceeds pumping in those years. And so we get to add water to storage in the basin. So again, 2025, we had a critically dry year, and a relatively modest amount of storage depletion was calculated for this year of about 1,100 acre feet. Now, over the past 5 years, we still have cumulatively added water to the storage, which primarily occurred just in these 2 wet years. So, next slide, please. SGMA regulations also require us to keep track of all of the surface water that's imported into the basin. And so the water district imports surface water to the basin from 3 sources, the Kachuma Project, the State Water Project, and an exchange program with the Santa Ynez Irrigation District. In 2025, the district imported a little over 3,300 acre-feet of water, the vast majority of which came from the Kachuma project, almost 3,000 acre-feet, and about 330 acre-feet from the Santa Ynez Exchange. And notably, no state water project water was imported in '25. Next slide, please. So total water use in the basin, so that's combining both groundwater pumping and surface water imports by source and user is tabulated for the annual report. And so in 2025, total water use was about 8,200 acre-feet, with the water district again pumping 1,000 acre-feet of groundwater and importing 3,300 acre-feet of surface water. And then the remaining water use in the basin, again, was private pumping by agricultural wells in the basin. Next slide. So that was a high-level overview of the conditions in the basin, rainfall, how much pumping's occurred, surface water imports. And so now I'm going to talk about the sustainability indicators that have been adopted for the basin in the GSP. SGMA requires every GSP to address these 6 sustainability indicators. So we have the chronic lowering of groundwater levels and reduction in groundwater storage, which are intimately related, seawater intrusion, water quality degradation, interconnected surface water depletions, and land subsidence. Now, I'll note that in the Carpinteria groundwater basin, interconnected surface water depletions don't apply. The GSP was able to demonstrate that although we have surface water bodies in the basin, the creeks are one of the main sources of recharge to the basin, those creeks are hydraulically disconnected from the aquifer system, and therefore are not subject to management by the GSA or the GSP. So moving forward here, I'll talk about the other 5 sustainability indicators and how things look as of 2025. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, chronic lowering of groundwater levels and storage are intimately related. We use groundwater levels as the measure of groundwater storage. And the GSP established a network of representative monitoring site, or RMS, monitoring well locations distributed throughout the basin, which are represented by these green dots on this map here. Next slide, please. So I don't have time to talk about all 10 of those wells, so I'm just going to focus on 3 of them that are sort of distributed spatially in the basin, just to kind of give you a sense of how things look. So this first one is RMS well 29D7, which is actually, it's located at the Water District headquarters and is the old Santa Ynez well that was converted into a monitoring well as part of the headquarters well construction project. Now, the SGMA regulations and in the GSP require for all of these RMS wells to establish what are known as minimum threshold levels, the measurable objective levels, and then these interim milestones that are used to gauge how the basin is performing with regards to these sustainability goals. Now, in terms of, sort of complying with SGMA and DWR, staying above the minimum threshold is really the most important and critical element here. And so this vertical dashed line shows when the GSP was adopted and when these minimum threshold and measurable objective levels became applicable. And what you can see here is that since the GSP was adopted, water levels have been consistently above the minimum threshold or MT level. We did see some declines in water year 25 here, but again, we're above the minimum threshold level, which is good. Next slide, please. So a similar slide. So this is RMS well 26A1. Now this well is located in that upland area near where Carpinteria Creek enters the basin. And that was where I noted earlier we had seen water level increases at that well and in this area of the basin. And what you can see here is that water levels at this well have been steadily increasing since the GSP was adopted, including in 2025 here. We're not sure exactly why that is. It probably reflects a change in pumping patterns in that area of the basin. For us to see this sort of continual increase in water levels even during dry periods. But again, the main thing is that water levels are above the minimum threshold level. Next slide, please. So this is RMS well 35E1. This is the only RMS well that's located in storage unit number 2, south of the Rincon Creek Fault. And again, water levels have been consistently above the minimum threshold level, and in fact, in 2025, just reached the measurable objective level. Next slide, please. So similar to water level and storage monitoring, the GSP established a degradation of water quality monitoring network. There were 10, I believe it was, RMS wells identified, again shown here as these green dots distributed throughout the basin. Overall, most of the wells in the basin met their respective minimum threshold levels, with the exception of 3 wells. 2 of those 3 wells, while they exceeded the minimum threshold, did not display any concerning trends. However, 1 well did display some concerning trends, which I want to discuss next. So this is RMS well 29D8, which is the district's headquarters well. And for all of these wells, we're monitoring 4 constituents for the water quality degradation SMC. Boron, shown on this graph, nitrate on this graph, chloride levels, and total dissolved solids, or TDS. Now what you can see is that boron and nitrate levels at this well have been consistently low and well below the MT levels for those constituents. Chloride and TDS, on the other hand, which are potentially indicators of seawater intrusion, we see since about 2020 this somewhat concerning increasing trend, a very steep pattern to these curves. They sort of have this sort of hockey stick look to them. And in 2025, the chloride levels at the headquarters well exceeded the minimum threshold level of 149 milligrams per liter. The TDS level approached the MT but stayed below it. So this is a potential concern. We're not sure if this may be indicating an early onset of seawater intrusion, but the district is taking action on this. The district is going to be pulling the pump on that well in the next few months, and we'll be doing some downhole sampling and surveys to determine exactly where these chloride or these elevated chloride and TDS levels are coming from. Is it just coming from one particular discrete zone, or is it coming from, the full A zone aquifer or the B zone aquifer? So we just don't know yet, but as I said, the district is acting on this to investigate what's going on here. Next slide, please. So that's a good segue to the other sustainability indicator, which is seawater intrusion. The GSP for complying with the seawater intrusion SMC defined the minimum threshold level as a 250 milligram per liter ISO contour line. So basically what this means is that, so this yellow line here is connecting the most seaward active production wells in the basin. And what we don't want to happen is for chloride concentrations on the inland side of this line to exceed 250 milligrams per liter. So all of the wells that were monitored and have been monitored up to this point have been below that 250 milligram ISO contour level, although as I just mentioned, the headquarters well, which is one of these RMS wells, got pretty close to it. It got up to about 243 milligrams per liter in the spring sample before declining again in the fall sample. The other thing that's important to note here, I know it's difficult to see, but there were 9 wells that were identified in the GSP for sampling along this line. And since the GSP was adopted, only the GSA has been able to gain access to only 3 of these wells. So the other 5 wells that have not been able to be sampled up to this point, the GSA will need to find some suitable replacements for those wells in order to comply with this.
Question, why aren't you able to get access to it? Is that the property owner won't
I
cooperate?
defer to staff on that question, but yeah, it's my understanding that they've either been unwilling to participate or have been non-communicative. So the district or the agency has reached out to these folks, I'm sure, on many occasions to gain access to these wells, and they just haven't been able to gain access. So again, in the absence of gaining access to these wells, we're going to need to identify some suitable replacements for those. Next slide, please. So seawater intrusion in the basin is also monitored at the seawater intrusion sentinel wells, which were installed by the district in 2019, very close to the coast, just northwest of the Carpinteria salt marsh near Santa Claus Lane. And there are 3 individual monitoring wells at this location, 1 each screened in the 3 main producing zones in this part of the basin, the so-called A, B, and C zones. Excuse me. And so I'll talk about each of those 3 here, starting with the shallowest well, which is this one here, the A zone well. So there are 3 panels of data here that are shown. This top panel is showing concentrations for chloride and electrical conductivity, which are the main indicators for seawater intrusion. This middle panel shows the water levels at this well. And then down here, this lower panel shows the daily pumping of the district's headquarters and El Caro wells. So what you can see at this well is that since the wells were drilled and sampling started in 2019, both chloride and electrical conductivity have been consistently low, and the chloride levels have been consistently below the 250 milligram per liter level, which is the secondary drinking water standard for that constituent. The other thing that you can see here is that when you look at these water levels and these pumping patterns, what you can see is that there's a direct correlation in response to pumping by the district wells on water levels at this well. And the other thing to note here is that for the most part, water levels have been below sea level, which is this blue line here, Water levels did rebound a little bit in 2024, but then we saw them decline again during the dry pumping season in 2025. Next slide, please. So this is a similar plot, same information for the middle zone, the B zone well, and a few interesting things here. For one thing, what you can see is that the chloride and electrical conductivity levels have just been all over the map. Sometimes they're very low and below the MCL for chloride, and then other times they've gotten really high. Not quite sure exactly what that means. I have a few hypotheses that I won't get into, but that's what we're seeing at this particular well. Again, we see a direct correlation in response of water levels at this well to district pumping. And again, water levels more often than not have been below sea level at this well. Next slide, please. So this is the plot for the deepest well. This is in the C zone. This is a little over 1,000 feet deep. And in contrast to the other two wells, what you can see here is that since this well was drilled and sampling began, both chloride and electrical conductivities have been steadily increasing at this well, indicating the possible presence of seawater intrusion coming into the basin in this zone over this period. So that is a concern. So again, similar pattern with water levels at this well. And again, more often than not, water levels are below sea level. Again, we saw water levels get above sea level in 2024. But here in the late pumping season of 2025, water levels did get a little over 10 feet below sea level before coming back again in the winter of 26. So next slide, please.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are these all sampled the same interval?
Yes.
Quarterly, is that what it is?
I think they might be,
Quarterly.
is it bi-monthly?
No, it was annually, then biannually, now we do it quarterly.
Yeah, sorry, I should know the answer to that, but.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit. But yeah, it's fairly frequent. We're getting at least 4 samples a year out of these wells. The water levels, on the other hand, those data are captured on an hourly basis. So finally, the final sustainability indicator that Sigma requires us to keep track of in these GSP annual reports is subsidence. Subsidence has not historically been observed in the basin. And the GSP established the minimum thresholds, or MTs, for measured land subsidence as either no more than 1/10 of a foot in any given year, or no more than 1/2 a foot cumulatively over any given 5-year period. And that's measured by what's known as INSAR data that are provided by DWR. And what INSAR is it's basically satellite microwave imagery that measures ground surface elevation with an accuracy of about 0.1 feet. And so in water year 25, there was less than 0.1 feet measured by the INSAR data. So basically none, or at least none that was measurable. Next slide, please. So that was a summary of the basin conditions and where we stand with the various sustainability management criteria, or SMCs, in the basin. The GSP also identified a variety of projects and management actions that could be implemented to achieve basin sustainability. And so I'll provide a very high-level update on progress on these 5 projects and management actions during water year 2025. So first, the CAP project. As you know, the CAP project is moving forward. And in 2025, the main progress was the CUP CDP was approved by the city of Carpinteria, and the bid package for the AWPF plant was put out on the street, and bidding was initiated towards the end of the water year. So the CAP project involves the injection of treated recycled wastewater, and once it's online, it will be injecting about 1,000 acre-feet of water into the basin on an annual basis. The Sentinel Monitoring Well Expansion Project consists of expanding beyond that initial Sentinel well that I discussed a moment ago to include up to 5 additional monitoring wells along that section of coast northwest of where the current monitoring well is located, to get a better idea of what's happening with regards to water levels, water quality along the portion of the basin that is exposed to the Pacific Ocean, and also to get some more information regarding the geologic structure and hydraulic properties of the basin for purposes of recalibrating the groundwater model. So that project just got started in 2025 with a well siting study was initiated in 2025 in September, I think it was. So that's what's happened on that project. The local infrastructure water system intertie project involves Intertine, the Carpinteria, and Casitas water district distribution systems. And significant progress on that in 25 consisted of the final design was completed, and bidding for that intertie was initiated, I believe it was in September of 25. The Smiley number 2 ASR project involves replacement of the failed Smiley number 1 well. The Smiley number 2 well is being designed, or has been designed, and will be constructed to be an ASR compatible well. Based on our initial estimates, we think that that well could be capable of injecting up to 500 gallons a minute when it's completed. And during 25, water year 25, significant progress on that project included the Water District was awarded a $2.9 million grant from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And the project, again, is just getting started and is in the initial design phase right now. And then the other significant management action, as you guys are well aware, the private well metering ordinance was adopted by the GSA, and that is just getting started. And the intent with that is to get meters on all the private ag wells in the basin to improve the level of accuracy of pumping in the basin. And so, yeah, like I said, that is just getting underway. Not sure offhand when we anticipate getting all of the wells metered and when we'll have all of that great data. But in 25, it was a significant milestone to adopt that ordinance and get it going. So with that, next slide, I think so that concludes my prepared remarks. And be happy to take any questions you might have.
I've got a few, if I could. Thank you, by the way. That's a really rich presentation of information and clearly makes the effort that put into it worthwhile. A couple of questions in no particular order. You mentioned trouble with accessing some wells as a result of some landowners' reticence. Mm-hmm. Have we exhausted all the alternatives to get what we need?
I'd have to defer to staff on that question. I'm really not sure what's been involved
Right.
in those communications. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer
Yeah,
to
that's
that.
fine.
We have our engineering manager, Brian King, here, who probably is the best person to answer that question on the history of, reaching out to everybody. Brian, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium to answer.
Right, so,
Thanks, Brian.
yeah, normally what we do is we send, each year we send the well owners a request, a permission request, and on these wells, they've always denied us to be able to sample them, so, I mean, maybe we need to come and offer them something a little better, I don't
Right.
know, since, I mean, the option, I think we have more of an advantage if they let us use their well as opposed to trying to find other wells, so maybe we have to maybe come up with some type of incentive.
Yeah, appreciate the visibility. I mean, it sounds like it's going to cost, something to have an alternative in place.
Right.
So,
But those the wells are there, it's just a matter of haven't allowed us permission. So.
Thank you. A couple other thoughts, at the risk of, demonstrating my naive appreciation for things. You also mentioned the creeks are hydrologically disconnected and therefore not part of the responsibility of the GSA. Where does that leave the creeks and the responsibility for, or the opportunity maybe is a better way to look at it, for understanding what kind of performance improvement we can get?
Well, it's outside the purview of the GSA.
Right.
Because they're disconnected. So what that means is that whatever sorts of management actions that are or not taken with regards to groundwater aquifers, it doesn't affect stream flow.
Is there a different jurisdiction that would contribute, or is it just opportunities off the table kind of thing?
I'm not a surface water person, so I can't really speak to that. But, there are lots of, friends of the steelhead type organizations out there, and various other, state and federal agencies that have jurisdiction over surface water. I think for purposes of the GSP and the annual report, again, it doesn't apply to what you guys are responsible for doing in terms of managing the groundwater basin. Now, there are lots of other situations where the groundwater basin aquifers are in direct communication with streams, and pumping can lead to stream depletion. But basically, in a nutshell, the situation here is that the only areas where creeks could be potentially affected by groundwater pumping is in that recharge area, right? Because that clay cap in the confined area limits any hydraulic communication between where the aquifers are and pumping that's going on there and the creeks. So as you get out of that confined area, the ground surface elevation starts increasing, and the thalwags, or the channel bottoms of all of these creeks, are at elevations that are significantly higher than the water table itself. So even though the creeks are a main source of recharge to the basin, they're disconnected from the groundwater basin in terms of water levels in the basin having an effect on stream flow. Basically, the way the streams interact with the basin is that when they're flowing, the water is just percolating through the unsaturated zone between the bottom of the creek channels and the water table. And depending on where you are in the basin, the distance of that separation, can vary between maybe as little as 10 feet of separation to, in the upland areas, the water table is, 100 feet or more below the bottom of the creeks.
Thank you. One last question. Up front, there's really powerful analysis going on, and this has been 5 or 6 water years that you've been doing this work. And right up front, there was some modeling done and some surveying done.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still valid, or are we heading to the point where we're going to have to reestablish the baseline and do a bunch of modeling work to continue with, this level of detail?
Well, so part of Sigma regulations require what's called a 5-year periodic evaluation. So for this basin, that will be due in, I think it's February of 2029. And so part of that evaluation is to basically sort of consolidate all of this information that we're presenting in these annual reports, which are just really kind of status checks, and revisiting how the basin has been performing over that 5-year period and making a determination whether or not any of the sustainable management criteria need to be altered, whether any additional projects or management actions need to be considered. But as part of that, and just as a matter of course, groundwater models do need to be periodically updated. And in particular for this basin, as we're collecting all of this new information and new data, and in particular, once we start getting that metered agricultural pumping data, you'll want to update the model. The more data you have for it to calibrate against, the more reliable it is. The other piece to that, and this is getting maybe a little too far into the weeds, but the way that we've been calculating basin storage changes since the GSP was adopted is through these water level changes and applying a storage coefficient value. And that's sort of a first approximation or a sort of a simple way of estimated storage changes. Historically, before the GSP was adopted, when the basin was being managed under the state program, the Groundwater Management Plan program, and in the GSP itself, the way storage change calculations were done was through water budget. Basically, we do a full accounting on an annual basis of inflows and outflows in the basin, and the difference between inflows and outflows gives you your storage change. And so for this 5-year periodic evaluation, both that water budget and the groundwater model will need to be updated and brought up to speed. Yeah.
If I could also add one more, and thank you, Robert. I think that was it's so great to have you here sharing all this information with all of us. My understanding is also the current groundwater model does not have a seawater intrusion component.
That's correct.
That's something we could consider at some point, adding a seawater so that we could model seawater intrusion under various scenarios.
Yeah, that's right.
Casey, any questions?
Just two quick ones. So I noticed the contour map doesn't have any on storage unit 2. Is that a function of the storage unit itself or just a lack of information in that?
Lack of
Yeah,
data.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. And then I'd thought my understanding was that effectively the lowest historical water level in the various stages of the basin is kind of how we set the MSL, but it doesn't look like that, and I can't remember why that is.
You're talking about what those minimum threshold levels are?
I thought we had landed ultimately kind of the historical low we've ever seen because it didn't affect anything then. But now I see it's not that way.
Yeah, and it was actually, so Sigma ties everything to the year just after it was adopted. So what the GSP and the GSA is responsible for is making sure that conditions don't get any worse than they were in 2015.
Okay, that's what it was.
So yeah, those minimum threshold levels are basically coincide with what conditions were like in 2015.
Thank you.
A question on those private wells that you want to monitor. You said the ones that are not giving you access have never given us access before, period.
That's my understanding.
And Brian, is there, I mean, I have a hard time believing that, well, why private pumpers wouldn't want to cooperate with the, I mean, is this a money thing? Is this a control issue? What is it?
I think it's just a matter of they just don't really want us taking a sample from their well or using their well as a monitoring, so.
Does the metering program give you the opportunity?
No. If you have a well that's active, you have to meter it, so.
But it doesn't, we're not going to be able to take water quality samples, for example. And that was a chloride,
Just while you're there. You just-
Well, remember we had that thing about no fittings, so.
Forgive me, strike that from there.
I mean, maybe we need to go back and really try to solicit these wells a little more and see if we can persuade them to let us take a
Well,
sample.
actually, we're going to ask Scott to talk to these people, but that's okay. Question, is there a B list? I mean, do we really have to have those, whatever, 8 to 12 wells that we're talking about?
Not necessarily. That's something that needs to be evaluated. We haven't had a chance to, at this point, we're simply identifying that, a lot of the wells that the GSP was expecting would be monitored, turns out haven't been. And so that's a future effort, is to look at other wells in the area that might be suitable to serve as replacements for these.
So how much time do we have in order not meet our state requirements to have access to these wells?
I can't speak for DWR. They up to this point have not commented on this issue. Because in those previous GSP reports that I mentioned at the beginning, this same issue was identified. At what point DWR might put the screws to the GSA, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's unknown. I mean, we do have 3 wells along that ISO contour. But there are areas along that line that we're not getting data on.
Right, but it sounds like it's not a money issue or access issue. It is just the private property pumper is not interested in sharing.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so are we going to make a B list then, or do we have the board go out and talk to these guys, or what's the plan here?
I mean, I guess I find it interesting or confusing that we would select those wells without securing access before. We've never had access, and just to assume we'd get it, I guess is weird, but I guess the ISO contour line kind of defines why we picked them, but.
Well, yeah, so the way the ISO contour line was picked was these wells are the most seaward or the closest to the shoreline wells. The process of developing the GSP didn't really afford the opportunity to, go out, reach out to all the well owners, confirm that we could do this. It's a plan.
Right.
But yeah, it's unfortunate that more than half of these wells that we were planning on monitoring as part of the GSP, we haven't been able to gain access. Now, as Brian alluded to, it may just be a matter of incentivizing these folks. I think up to this point, the GSA has just simply asked for access without anything in exchange. But the reasons why any individual well owner may decline to participate probably varies widely. Some folks may want a little something for it. Other folks, don't want to have anything to do with anything government is doing. So I think, it would be good to maybe get an assessment of each of these situations and get a feel for, what exactly the impediments are, and then develop a strategy or a plan to overcome those impediments if they can be, and/or identifying other suitable wells that could be substitutes. And that work just hasn't been done yet, but should be done moving forward.
Yeah, not to prolong it, I guess the last comment I'd make, I'd sort of lean towards education than compensation. Perhaps they just don't understand there's a shared consequence.
Yeah.
I mean,
Perhaps
shared
so.
interest, certainly. And
So,
Could be an opportunity for me too to, this is, since I'm
For
new,
sure.
executive director, to, establish a relationship or just try reaching out and
Right.
maybe looking at different ways to do outreach.
yeah, let's not assume a motive. Let's give them the opportunity to learn.
yeah, yeah.
Right, but also if, I think you want to reach out to these, how many wells we're talking about?
5.
So, yeah, if you reach out to those 5 owners and introduce yourself, tell them what a great job the GA is doing, and if they want to, what's the reason they don't want to help? I mean, it's,
Yeah, I think there's, a sales pitch that could be given. It's important to them to know what's
it's,
going
yeah,
on.
it's protecting their
It's
their
protecting,
basin
it's
also.
protecting their resource just as much as everybody else's. And in fact, those folks are the most vulnerable to this issue.
Ellie, it's in your hands.
All right, thank you.
May I speak to the
Yeah, go ahead, Scott. You might know why people are cautious.
Scott Vanderkar, Shepherd Mesa. No, I think you've done a good job of addressing the issue, and I think a little patience is necessary here. The well owners are hit with this meter situation, and I think it'll work itself out. And as one who does cooperate with the district and allows access to our 2 wells, they may not be in the right place for what you're looking for, but as far as the sampling goes, we do that. And I see it as, the spirit of cooperation. I think that's worth a lot, and we'll just have to gain trust and work forward on that basis. I do have a couple comments. One is, as I'm always trying to impress on people the importance of open ag and the agricultural lands with regard to that clay cap and that area of the valley. So it would look to me, according to the map, that a lot of the recharge is coming from those open lands north of that cap. So keeping those lands in a condition that recharge is helping and adding to the basin seems incredibly important because of that cap. Second thing you mentioned about the Carpinteria Creek and Gobernador Creek, I think one of the things, at least we're seeing in our properties, that 1 year isn't how nature works. And so when you have 2 back-to-back wet years, even though you have a third dry year, in some areas, there's this continuous recharge and water that's feeding certain areas, and wells will come up. And what we particularly saw this season with those early rainfalls, that it didn't take long for those areas that a year ago, before the dry 24-25, had shown surface water and out of hillsides and the like, and then they dried up during the dry year. But it didn't take long for them to pop back, and all of a sudden that water was coming out. So it's this additive situation. I think that's what you might be seeing. Last question with regard to the district well and that salt water chloride problem. I think it's naive on my part, but I look at the salt marsh and I look at the occurrence of king tides, and it seems as though we've had a lot of king tides lately where I drive by it, and that salt marsh is just brimming at high tide. And I wonder if there is any connectivity, especially with regard to the district, because it's not very far apart, and elevation-wise, it's not very far apart at all. Curious about that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent observation. So the Carpinteria Salt Marsh and the headquarters well are both located in this confined area. And that clay cap limits the amount of vertical percolation of water from above the clay cap down into the aquifer systems. But it's not a engineered impermeable structure. There is a little bit of leakage through that clay layer. And so that's one of the things that we're interested in learning when we do this downhole survey in that well, is where these chloride levels are coming from. If it turns out that those chloride levels are coming from the upper part of the screen, in the shallower part of the screen, then that may indicate something, a relationship that Scott was alluding to. On the other hand, if it looks like those chlorides are coming in down in that B zone, then that would be indicative of a different issue. So, yeah, that's one of the, like I said, that's one of the main reasons for doing this downhole survey at the headquarters well is the first thing we need to determine is where are these high levels occurring, and then that'll point us into trying to figure out where they're coming from. So.
Okay. Actually, Brian, on those, the wells that you are sampling, that's 4 times a year, quarterly, or the,
I know for sure we do them biannually.
oh, biannual? Plus, it's my understanding you give the well owner a free copy of the report, my understanding.
Right, so some of the well owners that have to do some of their reporting to the state, that's why they're usually they like the idea because they get the free report.
Well,
There's other ones that the report doesn't seem to, for them to get the well information is not as critical to them.
I mean, they're not reporting to the state now, we'll stay away from that one, so. Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Unless you think- Item number 6B, consider update on well registration and metering policy. Kelly?
Yes, thank you, and I'll try to keep this item brief. I just wanted to give a status update on implementation. And I think I might, just for brevity, skip over some of the background slides. Just, talking about Sigma and the purpose of having the metering policy was to improve our water management, have more accurate groundwater extraction data, and it involves implementation of advanced metering infrastructure for real-time groundwater monitoring. This is actually something, that Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency is pretty advanced in doing this type of technology. Most other GSAs aren't doing the AMI, but it really will help a lot in the future with having, the alternative is to have self-reporting, or just people have to go out and read the meters themselves and send in paperwork on a regular basis so that we have the data. This is going to be much more efficient for staff and for all the people that have wells. They will have much less paperwork to do. So the policy was adopted August 13th, 2025, and then as we got into implementation, we started receiving some feedback, and the board responded by adopting revisions to the policy that was on March 11th. We kept the deadline for March 31st as the deadline for well registration and flow meter registration. However, the penalties, the board approved waiving the penalties to allow more time, and so that will be reconsidered after August 31st. I did want to point out that we do need a little time in between getting the registrations and having the AMI data available. We have to install an endpoint. So we wanted to allow at least a month. So I'm just encouraging everyone to continue working towards getting their meters installed as soon as possible, but really no later than July 31st to give us some time to get out and install the endpoints.
Kelly, question, but doesn't the new water year start July 1st? Or the amount of water being metered?
Yes, so we ended up pushing back as part of waiving the penalties. We're going to be using estimated water, groundwater pumping until September 1st. And so September 1st would be the date when AMI data begins to be used for the annual pumping. So it'll be a part of the year using the old method and part of the year using the new method.
But how about the pumpers that put their their meters in ahead of July 1st, have them calibrated and signed off, they have a year then to prove a year from now that,
Yes, we ended up just wanting to treat everyone the same in terms of the charges. So we pushed everyone back to the September 1st date. We can start putting the endpoints on and collecting data, making sure it's working properly. But for billing purposes, we'll have everyone start on the same day. Typically, groundwater pumping is higher in the summer. So I just would rather treat everyone the same in terms of how they're being charged.
Does it, sorry to interrupt, does it feel like that extension's working? I mean, are we getting anything for the goodwill?
We're still getting people. There's a lot of people still coming in, and Danielle's been working almost full time on this to get this policy implemented, and she's had a lot of paperwork to get through. But she's making headway. This is how we've had 119 wells submit their paperwork. 43 are complete. Of the wells that have submitted paperwork, most of them are active wells that require flow meter installations. A good portion of them are abandoned wells for they're exempt from the flow meter requirement, and same with inactive wells. So this is just, we have a dashboard that we check on a weekly basis to see how we're doing, but we're definitely making progress. We're going to keep going with our outreach. So we had pretty significant outreach January through March, just leading up to that March 31st deadline. And then at this point, in May, we're planning to start again with press releases and advertisements, and just reminding people that we're here for registration assistance. They can make an appointment at any time to have staff help with the paperwork. And then as we get down to kind of a short list, we're hoping we get down to a short list of the remaining wells. We'll start doing targeted mailers and phone calls to the remaining property owners that haven't reached out to us at that point. So I'll give periodic updates, how we're doing and how the numbers are changing. But we've seen, I think, a pretty good response for the first 3 months of, that extensive outreach that we've done. Any questions?
Can you refresh my memory? How many wells do we anticipate receiving applications for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's going to probably around 250 to 300 is what we would target. That includes wells that are not actively pumping as well.
Thanks.
yeah, and just an observation, there's no problem getting meters. It looks like if you will to pay for them, you get them within 10 days, so that's a good thing. Go ahead, Scott.
May I speak on this?
Sure.
So Scott Vanderkart, I appreciate the leniency, and easier said than done for me doing this. And just a quick rehash of what I've been faced with. I had put in a couple of years ago meters on both my wells, but when I looked into retrofitting them, it just didn't work out because it didn't look like it was worth it. Whether I could even retrofit them and then have them certified and calibrated, it just seemed like I'll just start over again with 2 new meters. So I went to Coastal PIPCO, where I get a lot of supplies, and contacted one fellow who seemed to know enough to help me, and sent him all the information, all the requirements. I said, this is what I need, and he went on vacation. And so he kicked me to someone below him and who didn't know what I was talking about. So then I went over to another outfit recommended by Rick Shade, and he said, oh, he's got a 2-week delay for even getting to the design. And I'm thinking, what's the design? I'm taking out old meters and putting in new meters. So then I get a call Monday from Coastal Pipco saying the guy came back from vacation and he actually has a 3-inch meter there that came in on an order for another grower in the valley who didn't need that one. Do I want it? So I sent the information off to Danielle on Monday, and I'm waiting for the reply because I'm kind of gun shy about spending, I think it's $5,000 for a 3-inch meter without knowing, okay, this is going to do it. That's my sob story as far as, with all the best intentions, it just doesn't go as smoothly as it could, and it's not your fault. It's just the way things are, and I guess because we're one of the few districts that is doing this tech advanced system that is going to work in our favor, I believe, but the suppliers aren't necessarily up to speed on it. And I think chose the wrong ones to deal with, and we'll get it. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, just for information, we used Bennett Cascade, and literally he delivered the meters within 7 days, and he'll be, I would say that testing them to make sure that they're properly calibrated. So there's people out there. I think even Rick will install them for you, and no, he cannot calibrate, but anyhow, yeah, so far it looks like there's people out there that are hungry to install meters and calibrate them for you. So thanks. Item number 7, Executive Director's Report.
No, nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Then this meeting is adjourned. Then we, number 8, reconvene the regular meeting of the Carpinteria Valley Water District. Number 9, new business. 9A, consider update on CAP projects. For information, Kelly and Chris.
Yes, thank you, directors. And yeah, Chris Malajan is joining us remotely, so he will be giving an update and has a presentation prepared. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I can't wait till see the slides. Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Just as a short update on the CAP projects, updating from the last time I presented last month. So following a similar outline, reviewing the schedule, outreach, property acquisition discussions, funding, financing, and finally permitting. Next slide, please. So quick update here on our overall schedule. We are intending to begin construction next month. Pre-construction meetings have been scheduled for Monday, April 27th for the AWPF and Wednesday, April 29th for the conveyance pipelines, with the anticipation of issuing notice to proceed on May 4th. For the AWPF, most of May will be spent mobilizing construction trailers, and then in June beginning demolition of various facilities on site, with deep soil mixing planned as one of the first major activities in August. So deep soil mixing is needed to stabilize the soil under the existing, or under the AWPF. So deep soil mixing is where they'll mix cementitious material in situ with the soil to strengthen the soils. Concurrently, the conveyance pipeline, a contractor is intending to start and mobilize on May 18th on 6th and Olive. Then they will move to Linden after the Catalina Elementary School ends their school year. So there's a lot of constraints that was built into the contract for work on Linden and Meadowview, including working outside of school hours, the St. Joe's annual festival, and then working around the well drilling efforts. So they have a limited window to work on Linden and Meadowview. And for those reasons, we've come to understand that the contractor likely will operate two crews, one on the north side of the 101 and then one on the south side, sort of concurrent construction. This generally, I think, will be a positive effort as it will reduce our construction times and overall, lead to less impact on the community because of those reduced construction times. And then the injection monitoring well drilling, sort of same schedule that we've been communicating over the last couple of months, where we intend to bid here in June, July timeframe with start in October. Next slide, please. So because we are starting construction in the very near future, we've been doing a bit of outreach, and we'll continue to do so as we get closer to construction. And then while we're in construction, we'll continue to be doing some dedicated and specific outreach. So postcards, generally the one that you're seeing here, was issued to all customers within 500 feet of the project. I think there was around 470 postcards that were sent around to the community. Approximately 10 and 2 days before construction, we'll issue door hangers, again, around largely the conveyance portion, since they're the ones who will be impacted the most until the well drilling contracts begin. We've done an issue, sent out Coastal View articles. We're also doing some direct outreach to specific businesses and kind of community level engagement. As an example, the Lou Grant Parent-Child Workshop, their facility is right there at the end of 6th Street, right near the CSD's facilities. So during the last week or two of May, when their school year is ending, we will likely be on that street. So we want to make sure that the school is informed and that their parents are also adequately informed, because otherwise they may not have received a postcard or be aware of maybe the direct impact that the pipeline construction will have on them. So intending to do that throughout the duration of construction, sort of follow ahead of construction with dedicated outreach to those businesses and community centers that may be more impacted. And then finally, we do have a groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for the end of May. Save the dates were sent around. This is not a public groundbreaking ceremony. This is going to be focused mostly on leaders in the community and those in our the water world, generally because this is an active construction, or at least an active plant, and seating is going to be somewhat limited. So we're keeping that closed from the public. Next slide, please. I'd like to give a little bit of an update here on the property rights and acquisition since the last time we spoke. We've made a lot of great progress, and I do want to spend a minute here acknowledging the city's efforts here. They've participated in several meetings. They've worked with us and been flexible in identifying sort of a multifaceted approach to get through a lot of our final property rights, particularly those that were with the city. So I've updated this slide. We still have the Olive Street vacation to resolve, although, I mean, at this point, we're just waiting on the timing of our efforts to conclude, and I'll get into that in the next slide. We did get confirmation from the city that we don't and will not have any additional property rights necessary for Meadowview Lane. And then a lot of great progress has been made with the landowner of the agricultural parcel, which I'll talk about in a few slides. So next slide, please. Just an update then on the Olive Street vacation. So that, again, the intent is for the city to vacate this 20 by 90 foot strip that will be the area where we have our electrical switchgear, transformer, and then we're going to enclose this area with flood wall. The city went through the Surplus Lands Act process, have been over the last couple of months. The 60-day notice period ended about 2 weeks ago. There was one interested party, but through direct outreach communication with them, they have withdrawn their interest, paving the way for the city to vacate the property. With that said, though, we are still pursuing an alternative path to get us to have secured property rights, where we are pursuing an optional design to move the facilities that are planned for this vacated property to within the CSD property. And this is really solely as a mechanism to affirm our property rights sooner. So we do expect to have our property rights secured by mid-May. It's a little unclear how long the vacation process will take. It may extend beyond that time frame. And at that point, we will need to amend our lease agreement to include this 20 by 90 foot area. But for all intents and purposes, we think we're here with our property rights for this portion of the project. Next slide, please. For the agricultural parcel, for the monitoring wells, the landowner did execute the MOU. The location of the monitoring wells were staked and surveyed for the purposes of preparing the legal descriptions. The property appraisal is underway, and we expect to receive by the end of this month, followed shortly there with property negotiations. So we are hopeful that we will have our easements secured by the end of May, but we will see how negotiations occur. Before I move on, since there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting on property rights, I wanted to spend a minute just to pause here and see if there were any questions.
Sure, I'll get one. So why don't we know how long the vacating of that property will take?
Largely because the city is working with Housing and Community Development, an organization that they do not want to, or that they want to make sure that they do everything the right way. So they're coordinating with them. And the last meeting that we had on Thursday, those efforts just hadn't been done. So there is some level of uncertainty whether or not we need to wait the full 90-day process, which is the period of time that would occur after the 60-day public notice, where parties are negotiating with the city. Since all parties withdrew, and when I say all parties, I do mean one thing that we did was that we also, the city and CVWD submitted their own letter of interest. That letter of interest, again, was withdrawn as a part of this process to hopefully expedite the city's ability to say that this Surplus Lands Act process no longer needs to continue. So with all that said, as of last Thursday, that communication had not occurred with Housing and Community Development. And so there's just some uncertainty about whether or not they need to wait that full period. If they don't, then the expectation is that they could potentially move forward with the vacation in May. So again, we should know soon, but that's the best answer I can provide right now.
So if they don't know, or when they find out, what's that 90-day starting point from when the end of that 60
The end of the public noticing period. So that was, I think, the 10th of April. So that would have started the 90-day period after that. Again, I don't think there is any expectation that they have to wait the full 90-day period, but out of abundance of caution, they are trying to take all direction from housing and community development.
We just, it's possible it could wrap up sooner. It's just that we don't have that certainty, so we're still pursuing parallel paths right now.
Right.
With the alternative location on CSD property, that'll get us to what we need for continuing with our funding requirements, so.
And when will that design
mid-May.
adjustment be done? Mid-May?
Mid-May, that'll be
Yes.
done, and, our intent is still to build it in the original location, but it'll give us some time for that vacation process to play out. We just don't know, since it's dependent on a state agency that they're working with, on the timeline.
So housing and community development is state, not county?
It's the state, it's a
Yeah.
state agency.
And so, in theory, worst case scenario is mid-May, funding could be released based on the updated drawings at the very least?
So our goal is, if we can secure all the property rights necessary to be able to submit a request for funding disbursement by July, then our cash flow will be okay. And we've got some scenarios, those are later on in the presentation. And then we also ran a worst-case scenario for cash flow, where if we didn't get all of our property rights until the fall, September, October timeframe. And so it's, so you'll see what that looks like, but we're planning to set up a call with the state, I think probably in the next week or two, just to talk with them about our current status, because we've got almost everything wrapped up except for the only remaining thing will be the monitoring well on the ag property. And so just talking with them to explain that, because we might have some options, and so we want to make sure we're on the same page, so.
At the risk of being the bad guy, I would just encourage, considering further escalation if there's a problem. I mean, it seems like we had this risk before. We did get a conditional use permit for the city that didn't anticipate this. And there is consequence. I mean, we're considering, risk abatement that's going to cost us. So I think we should share that with the city. That'd be my comment.
So moving the switchgear onto CSD property is a reduction in the footprint, so it's a minor revision in our permit with the city. So they could do an administrative revision, but there was a public review process that's already started. They had to notice the adjacent property owners, which is about 10 or so properties. But it's, they have indicated they don't, as long as there's no objection, it should be pretty simple to do that revision. So.
Thanks. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. So quick update here on funding and financing. So I noted this last month, but we did submit our first disbursement request from SRF to the tune of $7 million based on all of our prior planning and design related costs. So those funds are expected to be received in June, and which will fund our initial construction work. And as noted, the reason why we're having this discussion here on property rights is that disbursements for construction funds are still dependent on obtaining property rights, but we've made a lot of progress in securing those rights. And just 2 weeks ago, we submitted our second disbursement for our Title 16 Water Smart grant, totaling $270,000, which we both submitted and received. So that grant covers a quarter of our project cost. So for every dollar that we spend on the project, that grant provides us with 25 cents. Next slide. So this is kind of tying back to funding and financing in our property rights cash flow scenario through the rest of the project. And the area that we want to highlight largely is the first couple of months after really that initial disbursement. So the 7 million that we requested back in March should show up in our CBWD's bank accounts here in June. So that's why there's the lag in between the months of March and June, which coincides with when we expect to begin receiving our initial invoices from the contractor. So the large, orange bar there, that first one, really represents our first big construction invoice that we expect to see from Walsh. And that 7 million can carry us through September roughly, and around September, if we have not yet received funding from disbursement for construction through SRF, is when we might find ourselves in a negative cash flow scenario. But so as Kelly noted, that September timeframe, that's based on us being able to request that disbursement in July. So as long as we can have settled our property rights by July and can begin requesting our disbursements, then we should cover ourselves for our cash flow purposes of the rest of the project. Next slide. So this sort of represents, again, a little bit of that worst case scenario where we are unable to request disbursement of construction funds because we have not secured our property rights. And this is when we might need that bridge loan to cover that initial gap. As Kelly noted, while we are exploring, what is the backup if Monaghan Wells becomes our sole property right issue? What do we do if negotiations fall through? And there will be time when between, because I think we'll kind of have a good handle and sense of that in the next couple of weeks on whether or not that's going to be problematic. And we do have an option that we will explore if that becomes problematic.
And we do plan on giving monthly updates on CAP, just so the board stays informed on how this is all progressing. One thing I did want to, before we move on to the next slide or take questions, our current cash balance for CAP is pretty low at the starting point here. So there's an item on the next item on the agenda will be to try and address that, to temporarily take funds out of the Water District reserves, the Capital Reserves Fund, and transfer them to CAP to get through this initial startup period until that $7 million disbursement comes in, which is expected to come by June. And then that million, we're proposing, it's really the next item, but the $1 million would then be returned back to the original reserve fund before the end of the fiscal year. So just a temporary, we'll have more discussion on the next item, but since this chart is up, I thought I'd point out that there is a need to address the next few months by temporarily using reserves.
Sorry to reiterate, but back to my earlier point, I'll just ask a really direct question. Is the city aware of this curve? Have they seen this impact?
They have
Yes.
not seen. Yeah, maybe we did.
I would encourage you to make sure that they fully understand the impact of the delay associated with what they're doing.
It was one of the first things that I discussed with them, which is when we started these weekly meetings with them. So I think we're very close to wrapping up our resolution with the city, but it is, something we shared initially, and then also this was presented at the Joint Utilities Commission meeting, which we recently had, which was 2 of the council members in attendance, so.
Thanks.
I've kind of brought this up before, but I guess what's frustrating is it feels like we're so far behind the 8 ball on this, and I want to know the failure point in not identifying, especially the Olive Street location, and how we did not identify that as being such a pinch point in this project. We've got consultants on every aspect of this project, and to miss it seems so outside of the realm of normal to me. I can't quite understand how he did it, and we've managed to jam ourselves up where, I mean, we're talking days is going to make a huge difference to the operations. So I guess we hear about these failures, but never seem to get any discussion or answers on them. So I'd love to know how we got into this position.
Right. I mean, I will, we talked about this a little bit last time, and I'll do my best again, and to at least try and highlight the Olive Street vacation in particular, because that is the one where, we were attempting to get ahead of this. We've been talking with the city about this now for a year, both with the city's property rights consultant on board that was helping to shepherd this along with the city, as well as the CSD's own legal counsel attempting to engage with the city through this whole property rights issue related to Olive Street. We believed it was going to be a simple process because Olive Street had been vacated recently, and it was the expectation of the team that they would follow a similar process and not involve the Surplus Lands Act. It really wasn't until, I think, the fall of 25 where the city made, I think, a conservative judgment that they needed to follow the Surplus Lands Act, at which point the process has played out the way that process was going to play out, despite advocacy by both the CSD's legal counsel and the district's own property rights consultant advocating for not to follow it, that it wasn't required, based on citing specific code. They felt otherwise, I think, and hearing from them, largely because of their relationship with housing and community development and the desire to not do anything inappropriate, however conservative that position may have been. They had consulted apparently with them back in the fall, and the response that they received from Housing Community Development was to proceed with the Surplus Lands Act.
Wasn't the apex of that whole decision-making during the Planning Commission review and issuance of the conditional use permit?
Generally, yes. I mean, we had gone through, and I really should know this much better, but the government code section that, began the process of vacation was in September of 25. And it was only shortly thereafter that they made the decision to proceed with the Surplus Lands Act to vacate that property. So I say all that to say that, right, I mean, this is we've been found in this position. I don't think it was due to anything that we were, as a team, negligent about. It has played out the way somewhat out of our control, despite us trying to assist and control the matter. I don't know if that is adequate, Director Balch, but if you need more information, just let me know.
No, I appreciate the answer. So I guess just to understand it right, there's existing switchgear there, there's existing utilities there. Is this a function of the flood wall that's making it where we're requiring to get the property, or is this something different? Is that flood wall creating the problem?
That's right. I mean, I think it was at a culmination, an accumulating infrastructure that was proposed in that area that resulted in the intent to, and the request by us to for the city to vacate that property. I think the flood wall being the major addition that was really, yes, okay. If we're going to take this land and effectively make it, not usable by anybody else, it really should be a part of the CSD parcel. If we had just proceeded with the switchgear and the transformer, right, that's still land that is, if partially usable, it's open to the public and therefore probably wouldn't have necessitated the vacation. But with the addition of the flood wall, which is the right thing to do because it adds protection not only to the CSD's existing electrical facilities, which are currently, again, outside the flood wall, but also to the AWPF. So it really made sense to enclose everything within the flood wall. And, as a result, again, the belief was that, okay, let's pursue this with the city. And at the time, over a year ago, again, it wasn't contemplated that we would need to do this because we had recent example of when the city vacated it, and they made a different judgment this time.
Thanks.
Okay, are we ready? Okay, great. So permitting, just some local recent activity. So with the property owner signing the MOU and the application for our coastal development permit with the county, all of that was submitted last week. We expect that process to take 4 to 6 months, which will align with the start of well drilling activities. And I've got one final slide here just as a quick reminder. It's not the only permitting activity we have underway. And so just a quick update on all of our other activities for permitting the project. Our Title 22 engineering report, so the draft was submitted last fall. We did receive formal comments now. We do need to update the groundwater model due to the relocated injection and monitoring wells, as well as some recent information that we obtained from Spinner Survey of the El Caro well. And so I think I noted that in the last meeting, that is a contract we will be bringing to the board sometime this summer. And we do expect an approved Title 22 engineering report in Q1 of 27. With that approved Title 22 engineering report, we can then prepare our permit application, our WDR, WRR. That is really our permit for the facility. While we can't apply for that permit until the Title 22 engineering report is accepted, we have been working on aspects of the permit application. And really, these are the more critical aspects, the geochemical analysis and the anti-degradation analysis. So under these two scopes of work, we have, it really is to provide an initial assessment of what the injected purified water and into the groundwater basin, how that might react with the groundwater basin and the native groundwater. So that work was done, and then what that might leach out in terms of predominantly arsenic, which has been found in other AWPF projects where you do see this initial arsenic spike that does tend to fade over time, over a short amount of time. So both that work has been done and submitted to the state for their review. And again, we can't submit the formal application until the Title 22 report has been accepted. And we expect our approval for that permit in about a year later, Q1 2028. And we really only need this permit in place before the final commissioning of the project and putting the project online. which is expected at the end of 2028. So there's quite a bit of buffer there. And then concurrently we've got our CDS or the CSD NPDES discharge permit. So this is an update to their discharge permit. This permit is tied to the waste discharge WRR permit above. But the key aspect of that permit we've already done and submitted to the state, which is the dilution analysis. So this analysis evaluates the discharge of concentrate as opposed to secondary effluent. City CUP CDP, this has been approved, and as noted, there's just our minor revision related to property rights, but again, that's largely just to be able to tell the state with our SRF loan that our property rights are secured. And then county CDP, just noted previously, that application was submitted, and our contractors are working on all of their construction-related permits for short-term impacts for construction. And with that, if there are any final questions.
Anything? We're good? Thank you. We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Then, Kelly, we go on to item number 9B. Consider use of reserves for the cash flow purposes for action. Kelly?
Yes, thank you, Director. So we kind of, you previewed all the issues already in the CAP update. So we're seeking approval to temporarily use $1 million out of our capital reserve fund. And then once we get the disbursements going from the state, that would be returned back to its original, it would be returned before the end of the fiscal year. So there is in your packet a summary of the current status of our reserves. Overall, when you look at all of the reserves available, they're above our policy target in total. And we had $1 million, there was $1 million available in the capital reserves fund. So that's the one we're proposing to use. If you have any questions, Norma can answer regarding the status of our reserves.
Just a mundane accounting question. So when we bring this out and put it back in, is there revenue recognition in the process? So I think when you normally pull out from reserve, you recognize revenue. No? Yeah. Sorry.
No, there's no revenue recognition.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed the target was a little north of 4 million, and we're only at $1 million right now. Is that just over drawdown over the year? What's that like?
The target for the capital reserves?
Yeah.
So the capital reserves target right now for the budget, it is 3.2. Our capital unbudgeted is 1 million, so it's a total of 4.3 million, and we are on target. We do have that much available.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw it was like $1.080 million in there right now.
That's for the unbudgeted, and then if you take into account the budgeted 3.2, you sum those together, it's 4.3. So right now, our overall reserves are about at 892,000 above our target levels for the various buckets.
And then I had a question on, when we raised rates a few years ago with the anticipation and need for coverage ratios. Mm-hmm. And I guess I had thought that some of that money had been set aside for CAP. Is that not the case? If we have no funds set aside for that, or did we burn through that already?
But some of the funds went to unexpected increases throughout those fiscal years.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Can we have a motion?
Motion to approve consideration of the use of reserves for CAP cash flow purposes, item B.
Big shoulders.
You can second it too.
Okay, and I prefer you to, but I'll second it. We got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor,
Aye.
Director Balch,
Aye.
Director Van Wingerden.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2 with Director Roberts and Holcomb absent.
Okay, then we move on to, thank you guys. Then we move on to director reports. 10A, Administrative Committee meeting, April 14, 2026. There was both Polly, myself, Kelly, and Norma were there. And we reviewed all the proposals from the different law firms, which we will be reviewing in our closed session. So that's nothing else to report. And then, Mike, if we're okay to do this, I was going to dispose of number 11 unless one of the directors here has any questions. Then I'd like to dispose of those, item 11A through D. Then we move on to item 12, closed sessions. 12A, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 of the subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9, one potential case. And Michael was going to add something to this.
Yes, this relates to a formal protest of installation deposit, capital cost recovery fees, and intensification fee for 4745 Carpinteria Avenue mixed-use project pursuant to Government Code Section 66020.
Thank you. Then we got item number 12B, in 54957, title Special Counsel Discussion of Candidates Proposals for Labor and Employment Legal Services. Then we got 12C, closed session item, Public Employee Appointment, Government Code Section 54957, title Special Counsel Discussion of Candidates Proposals for Water Rates and Legal Services. And then we got item number 12D, closed session item, Public Employee Appointment, Government Code Section 54957, titled General Counsel, Discussion of Candidates Proposal for General Counsel Legal Services. And we are into closed session, we're going to closed session.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
We're back in open session, and then item number 12A. Michael, you'll take this one?
Sure. The reportable action would be that instructions were provided to council to defend against a formal protest of installation deposit, capital cost recovery fees, and intensification fee for 4745 Carpinteria Avenue mixed-use project pursuant to Government Code Section 66020, and the potential plaintiff in that matter would be 4745 Carpinteria Avenue LLC.
Okay, thank you. And then on 12B, C, and D, no reportable action. Then we got item 13, consider dates and items for the agenda for the Carpinteria Valley Water District Board meeting of May 13, 2026 at 5:30 p.m., Carpinteria City Hall, 5775 Carpinteria Avenue, Carpinteria, California, and we are adjourned. I'm going to